This program is made possible in part by the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, one of America's top research universities, preparing students for today's interdependent world with internationally focused academic and outreach programs. The Institute of World Affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee presents International Focus, a weekly discussion of the people and events behind today's global headlines. Now, here's your host, Doug Savage.
Welcome to International Focus. The wave of popular protests known as the Arab Spring brought thousands of citizens in several countries to the streets to air their grievances and call for change. In particular, the mass protest in Cairo's Tahrir Square received global attention. Eventually, however, many people in England and elsewhere grew weary of coming out to join large public demonstrations. Our guest today came up with a novel alternative for public discourse in Cairo that's been applied in several countries around the world. Salam Yousry is the Egyptian musician and theater director. In 2010, he helped establish a complaints choir in Cairo. The project involved a one-week workshop that brought people with non-theatrical backgrounds together to create a performance in which they used music to discuss current issues. While the attention of Egypt's security services limited the number of venues willing to host live performances, the choir gained significant following online. In the years that followed, the model has been applied in several other countries, morphing into an international phenomenon known simply as the Choir Project, managed by our guest. Salam Yousry, welcome to International Focus.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Well, I wonder if you could, add a few details to that story. It was 2010, you were in Cairo, and how did this project get started?
First of all, it's too big to say that it's a phenomenon, but I'm glad and I thank you for the great introduction. In 2010, it started by simply as a curator in the Townhouse Art Gallery in Cairo, named Sarah Rif'i. She wanted to make the Cairo Complaints Choir from the international movement that's complaintschoir.org. And the idea is to collect complaints. For me, it was the collective experience that interested me. And then we were gathered like almost 22 people, and we collected complaints. Although I really discovered that I cannot say I'm against, but I don't really like the idea of complaining. I figured out that complaining is a very negative thing. It's just it has a very negative connotation, and it doesn't lead to action. It doesn't lead to a proper conversation. So for me, even in this workshop, we produced a song that was questioning the idea of complaining. And the project was 1 week long. Then we did 2 presentations, very short. And then we decided to keep going, but we didn't want to keep the theme of complaints. And then we figured the name collectively, the Choir Project, in Arabic, Mashru'a Choral. That means actually that it's a project that could be a choir, but it's not really a choir, so it's almost a choir. And then we started proposing different theme to another week workshop, and with the awareness that it wouldn't be turned into a band or a project, a settled project. It's based on workshops, always an open call and new participants, always open to people who are off tune and non-professional, and this flexibility and this spontaneity of people joining together to listen to one another and produce something. And so on, we went like producing songs about Egyptian proverbs, so gathering Egyptian proverbs. Some of the songs were really political because most of the participants were activists and interested in human rights and in arts and in politics. It was a moment that we cannot say that it's just 2010. It's been there, like an energy of, you can say anger, you can say an interest towards a change, towards something new, towards different propositions, and so that it was there. It was happening for years. Conversations in the metro, with taxi drivers, everyone was talking politics, and then in 2011, this utopia based in Tahrir Square for like 3 weeks, and Mubarak stepped down, and then the project got a little bit more interest from people because the energy in cities around Egypt was amazing. Like, people wanted to go initiate projects, participate in projects, and then the interest also started in Amman. They invited me at the day of the music freedom, and we did another project. And then this formula of a small band that travels, we create a workshop, and then that's it. And it's more about the process and how we interact.
We'll talk a little bit about that. I mean,
Yeah.
let's underscore the people who participate are certainly not professional and very often don't have any experience in theater or formal. So how do they come to you?
As I mentioned, it's an open call, so people interested or feeling like they need the space to express themselves, and the open call is always clear. You don't have to have background in singing or writing or composing music. And there are participants who are professional musicians who help the group produce like the melodies they try out. And there are also writers, but the good thing about this process that when there are professionals within this process, they become equal to, like, they have an equal status to the amateurs. So it's really the one who comes with an idea that goes through the minds of the collective and then becomes interesting to the collective. So we go for it. So they come because the networks, also the word of mouth, the networks are it's a big city like Cairo or Alexandria, but actually people get the information until it became a bit known. Like some mainstream channels posted our videos or hosted us to perform live. So it got bigger and bigger crowds interested in it.
So depending on the subject matter, getting too political has its risks as well. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, when the project became known to the security establishment, how did that impact what was going on?
I think I personally believe everything is political. And it all depends on the discourse, the way you present your ideas, and the moment. And there were like it was a period like the past years. There was no time even to process the events that took place. Like every week, every day, there is something new. There is a cause. There is an interest in something. There is a group that proposes something. So doing a workshop or holding a workshop, this space for people, wasn't meant necessarily to produce political content, but it was meant that they get the chance to express themselves. So basically, if they come in at a moment where they're busy with an event, so they speak about it. But I try always to keep it an open discourse. So basically, the songs are more about questioning, not about like statements. This is a discourse I like personally, but then my role is to open the discussion, to make it a little bit inspiring more than just a statement or a demonstration. I'm not really interested in demonstrations or just political raw content. For me, the dynamic in the group is really political because the way we choose, how we make choices. Is it voting? Sometimes we use voting system because it's very simple, and it's a shortcut basically. So if we're 100 people in a room and 60 says yes, we go for the 60, but the 40, and then I try to discover with the group other formats. So a consensus, for example. So it takes really long, and then people get bored and then decide. But and in other ways. I actually, if there is 100 and only 4 said no, we go with the minority. So it's always, for me, like it's not at all about the songs. It's not at all about the political content or not. It's mainly about the finding like this lab of trying things out, getting to know people, getting to know what does it mean, group dynamic.
So walk us through a little bit more of that process. You know, so you put the open call out. Some number of people turn up and say, "Yes, I'd like to participate." What happens then?
Then I just step in the rehearsing space or the theater, and I get a sense of I have to be really focused. And also I have partners who help a lot, and we've been working together for long. So we get the room ready energy-wise. So basically producing positive energy, doing very simple basic vocal exercises, breathing exercises.
And this is over how long a period of time? What am I committing to if I say, yes, I'd like to be part of the next project?
You commit to what you want, because basically the door is open. So when you come and you don't like me, for example, you can step out of the room. You can show up one day and then second day you don't feel like coming, you don't come.
So how long is the rehearsal process?
It used to be 10 days or 7 days. Then we tried other formats like 3 days workshops, very short, and then 1 day workshop. And now I'm not really interested in very short term workshops. The last year we've done like a 6 months workshop.
Wow.
For 30 people. And we produced a musical, absurd, interesting piece.
And where was this?
This was in Cairo.
In Cairo, okay.
The entities that invite me, like festivals or theaters or universities out of Egypt, definitely there are limitations because the program, the funding, the opportunity is limited. So we do it in very short term. But it's mainly a week long. It produces something interesting. And you can commit as long as you're interested in the process, because you pay nothing to attend the workshop. I'm mostly not paid, especially in Cairo or in Egypt. I don't get paid for the choir project workshops unless it's related to an institution with a specific group. So this is interesting because this is a model that creates engagement without contracts. So for me, it's a production model also more than just a project.
So, you know, the environment for any kind of expression is challenging these days in Egypt. I'd like to read a quote here by Amnesty International's North African Campaigns Director, who says, "It is currently more dangerous to criticize the government in Egypt than at any time in the country's recent history. Egyptians living under President Al-Sisi are treated as criminals simply for peacefully expressing their opinions." Do you find people are reluctant to express opinions, or if they turn up for your project, they've already crossed that point?
I'm sure, and this is probably the only answer I have. I believe in people's sense collectively, for the momentum and the period of time. So they know when to talk, when to express themselves, when to take a break, when to pause. I believe that, and I learned that from the collective decisions that were made spontaneously, sometimes in set-ins, or it's weird. Like sometimes you feel like there is a banner put, for example, at one of the set-ins, and because the majority don't like it, or the people want it to be independent, for example, of one of the set-ins in November 2011, most of the political parties and movements weren't allowed to join the set-in. So people really took it off, like any banner that doesn't fit within. And it was a collective, I guess it was a collective decision. And so I believe in that. And it's part of the history. We have a timeline. This is part of the timeline.
So you've been doing it for close to a decade now. Have you noticed the subject matter, the things that people want to talk about, changing over that time? Is there any sort of identifiable trends?
In Egypt, it's very specific because, as I said, like in a very long, like in half of this period, the 10 years, there were events every day. So they were busy with this. In other cities, it's really diverse. Like it could be in an international group. It can talk about migration, leaving your country and being somewhere else. What does it mean? In some cities, it's very political, and if activists join in, and I cannot generalize because it's not the city. Like this workshop we're doing right now, if it doesn't take place at the University of Milwaukee, and this group joined another group, it would have been a totally different experience. So I mean, I figure out that there are patterns, for example, and very general, like most of the workshops I do are with a majority of women or girls. And this made me question, are girls more interested than women, interested in extracurricular activities, and men are more into like having a beer or playing PlayStation with their friends in their spare time? I don't know. But this is, for example, something I noticed quite clearly. I noticed also, and something I've learned, and that's really interesting for me, that the space this workshop offered, it's not for marginalized people. It's for people who need a space out of their day-to-day routine. And then it's really a parallel space to time and space, yeah.
So why is that, do you think? What is lacking in our typical daily lives that doesn't afford that opportunity? I mean, what need are you filling with this project?
We're rushed, and I guess educational systems all over the world, they put children on tracks. So in order for them to be productive, economically productive, artists or not, if you produce art and you're not productive, it doesn't produce money, so it doesn't mean anything. And so the whole system, educationally and economically in the world, pushes you so much, and you forget, I guess, the talented child that I'm sure is talented, because I've been teaching children who are 3 to 5 years old, and this is how I got this this understanding of everyone is talented, but they tend to forget. And if you establish the right energy, a positive energy, where trust, comfort, and then and no judgment whatsoever to thoughts. You leave your status outside, so it doesn't matter who you are, what do you do, or your age. It's just your presence and what you're going to share with the group. So all these things, definitely in societies, we judge a lot, and we don't have space to really, for let's say, this sort of interaction. I guess maybe in transits, in airports, between a plane and another,
Right.
or on a plane while traveling. Yeah.
So it sounds like the process is at least as important, if not more important, than the ultimate product at the end of it all. So how do the audiences react?
Also depends on the place where we are, the number of the group. Definitely if we're in Cairo and we're like 80 or 100 on stage, the energy is, even if you don't like the content or the songs, you'd be moved by the energy, the sound that's produced. Collective sounds are really, I guess, effective psychologically, and the effect is really powerful. I guess it's always interesting, even for people who don't really like it. They won't say like, I would have preferred not to go. It's always interesting. You'll see faces, you'll see what did you produce in a week, but mostly audience appreciate it. I don't really care. I pity the audience most of the time, because to just present something that's mostly is not really mature, and sincerely the process is what matters. I like a lot of the products, but I don't listen to it at home, for example. But so I pity the audience most of the time, but lately I don't pity them that much, because it's also an experience. The energy is great.
So what happens to the product? Is it in any way documented, or is it ephemeral? I mean, do the collective comes together for a week, decides what they want to do, performs it, and then it's gone?
There is always documentation. Everything is filmed and recorded, and most of it is online. I have footage of a week-long workshop, for example, and I'd love to edit it with the process, but I don't have the time. But it's there, and it's open source, in my opinion. Like there are no copyrights. I don't believe in copyrights, so whoever wants it can take it. I guess a couple of our friends and participants have copies, and I work on putting more and more online. Like some of the workshops take me 3 years until I put the product online, but I like to think it's more ephemeral, like what stays in your mind. It's not about documenting always. Yeah.
So what do you hear from the participants after the experience?
I get a lot of love, because I always questioned. It's very exhausting to me personally, like all these people, and getting to try to work with them and not to lead, and trying not to lead, but try to help find the dynamic. And every time I give myself a different role, because it would be boring if I don't do so. So every workshop is a different process, different way. And every time I question, why do I do it? Why do I keep doing it? It's very exhausting. And then the love I get in the end, and actually keeps me going. But also, a lot of people become friends. This is in all choirs of the world. I guess it's part of the how to create a society. People from different social classes get together. Some people really change their lives afterwards. This open space makes them choose crucial choices, like, for example, leaving their jobs and finding other careers. It happened. I don't believe that this process affects it. It's just getting out of your day-to-day routine and find a different space, alternative space, leads to this.
So what is success then for this initiative? How do you know if you've been successful or not?
If I don't bore the audience or the participants, if it becomes a joyful experience, for me it's successful. If we didn't just lose our time and we never got inspired. If it's inspiring, that's enough for me. Because we've been to Bassem Youssef's show, and he's quite famous, and it was the most scene show in the Arab world, for example, and we got a huge fan booming on our fan page. So I decided to stop the project for a year until people forgot it, and then I came back to practicing it because it needs to be small in that sense, community. It cannot get mainstream. It cannot be mainstream. It has to stay on volunteering basis. Like no one is paid, no one is paying anything, no funds. That's for me success, to just not to lose the track and to know exactly why do I do it.
And what do you think success for your participants would be?
For the participants, it's really different because every participant has a different belief in the project and a different motivation. Like my mom even joined the project for a while, and she came because she wanted to say political statements. There are guys who come to flirt with girls. There are people who are really not talented, but they think they have the most incredible voice and they need to be heard.
Well,
but I mean, the interest varies, so I cannot talk about them.
Well, it's a fascinating model, and I appreciate you coming to tell us about it. Salam Yousry, welcome.
Thanks very much.
To our viewers, we'll see you next time on International Focus.
This program is made possible in part by the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, one of America's top research universities, preparing students for today's interdependent world with internationally focused academic and outreach programs.